Okay, great. Good evening, everybody. Today we are at the second round of the judge debating competition, and the motion of today is this House believes that time is an illusion. On the government, we have Prismatic, Pulsars, and on the opposition, we have magnificent Meteors. I wish all the very best to all the six participants. And with that, I'd like to invite first speaker from the proposition to present their arguments. Your time will begin with your first word that you say. All right?
Okay. Uh, I can start speaking now.
Yes.
Okay. So the motion is time is an illusion. So let's see, what do we mean by time? First of all, we experience the notion of time throughout our day. We say that this thing took me 5 minutes to do. This lecture lasted for an hour. My entire day was horrible. So we have these measures for time: minute, day, hours. But as you see, these aren't really the measures of time itself. It's these are more measures of the duration. Whatever we experience as time is not really the time in its true form. Whatever we experience is just the duration, and this duration can change depending on the units that we use. So it's a very vague idea in a broad sense. And the illusion itself is basically anything that appears to be in a certain way, in a certain form, but in reality it has a completely different form, or in some cases it doesn't have a form at all. So let's see. So there is one thing that is also quite elusive, and I would like to compare that to time, and that is mass. So we have the concept of mass to understand the togetherness of all the matter around us. So similarly, we have the phenomenon of time to understand the notion of activities that go on around us. You see, the mass, it doesn't, the particles that constitute the matter, they themselves do not have mass. We know that the mass comes through their interaction with the Higgs field. So if the Higgs field, suppose, is removed, the particles wouldn't interact with it and there wouldn't be any mass even though the particles are there. So this concept of mass itself is a huge illusion. We can have same logic for time as well. Suppose the particles themselves do not have uh, a fundamental quantity that makes them flow through time at all. It's a field. It's a field like Higgs field. We can call it a time field with which they interact, and this interaction gives them the ability to have the flow through time. If we remove this field entirely, just like mass, we wouldn't have any time either. So this creates an illusion of time, and it shows that the time that we thought was so absolute is very easy to shake with some different theories. Further, let's see. We have always thought
Here,
that, yeah.
the government mentioned time and duration. So, how do you define both in a different context?
A duration has to have a start and an end. The time itself has a much different is a much different phenomenon. You can think of duration as a small slice of time, or or even better than that, you can look at it as the stage that shows time. It's like a mask on top of it, which we see, which creates the illusion of having a time. So further, I'll like to go on to say that we always think that actions occur through time. There are actions because there is time, but in the sense we can completely think of it in an opposite way as well. There is time because there are actions. If there weren't any actions, we wouldn't be able to tell if there is a flow of time or not at all. It's like quantum mechanics. When we think that we say that there is a chair there, we can only say that the chair exists if someone is observing it. If no one is observing the chair, there is no way to prove that the chair exists. Similarly, if there are people, or not just people, there are things that have time flowing through them, only then can we feel that the time exists. If there is nothing to feel the time flow, the time just simply does not exist. So activities being an outcome of time is completely wrong. It's basically time being the outcome of activities. If there wasn't a past and if there wasn't a present, you just wouldn't be able to tell where you are in a time scale, because time just does not exist if there isn't an action in past and if there isn't an action in the future. So that was another argument. And a very vague way to fill this is, when we are busy, when we are doing work, when we are doing activities, we feel that time is passing quickly. But when we are just sitting idly, we are doing nothing, or we are meditating, we feel that time is going very slow. This distinction is due to the illusion, and it shows that how time depends on activities rather than activities depending on time. I would like to end my argument here. Thank you.
Thank you, first speaker from the proposition, for your arguments. We'll now move on to the first speaker from the opposition.
Hello, I'm the first speaker from the Magnificent Meteors. So I will now base my arguments. So first of all, that I'm saying that time is a very crucial aspect of many of the physical or fundamental things that are happening. So without time, it will be impossible for us to make sense of many of the things that are happening around us. How will you define a radioactive nucleus which is constantly radiating some particles? How will you define entropy if time doesn't exist? We can. So my first point is that without time, another example is, if we did if it wasn't defined that we have to have this debate at 8 o'clock, how would we have arrived at this competition? So there so I think my point is that the time is very real, and so my point is that the time is very real. Okay. And also my second point is that uh, so when they say that the time is an illusion, they tend to say that like the future and the future, the past and the present, like that doesn't make sense. We can't like put them in certain boundaries. So
POI.
uh, yes, yes.
So, are there no physical equations or processes that completely work without the requirement of time?
Like, there are there are but there are some examples. You can't reject the entire concept of time just because there are few exceptions, I would say. So I would like to continue with my argument. So right. So I was talking about the boundaries that we are making between the present, the past, and the future. So for the future to happen, we need to for the future to happen, we need to make some activity in the present, and that will define our future. So we are saying that whatever will happen in the future is will be defined will is based on what we're doing now. So the argument that the present, past, and the future are separated, are separated, or are separated. So we can say that the future is like not deterministic. The future is not deterministic, and my third right. My third argument will be key. Right. So we say so there is this notion that the different people have different magnitudes of time, but one person's time is different from the other person's time. But that is because we are not we're not good keepers of the time, and that is not some flaw in the notion of time, or the flaw in the definition of the time. So we have made proper machines that we call as clocks. We can't say that just because as humans we can't measure time properly, the time is not real or time is an illusion. We have made proper devices for them. We call them as clocks and we use them, right? So right. So therefore I would say that time, so we have proper definition of time, and we can also, so there is also this concept that different people have people have different different time have time like for different people time flows in different speed, but we can also like with relativity we can relate the time of different people. So right, so I would like to that's all.
Thank you, first speaker from the opposition, for your arguments. I would now request the second speaker from the proposition to present their arguments.
So I'll start with my argument. So I'll be talking in Hindi. So I hope everyone is comfortable with it. That's okay, right? Can you hear me?
Yes,
First.
we
Yes,
can hear.
yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
I mean, if anybody has any
Language barrier.
yeah, right now, please raise it right now, because later you
No,
can't tell me.
No.
no. Go for it. Go for it.
Okay, so you can start the time also. So let's consider two watches. We have two watch. Keep it parallel, right? So when we move, they are both in sync, right? So दोनों clock भी sync में है. एक को ऊपर लेके गए like at a particular height और एक को like नीचे रखते हैं. After some time हम वो दोनों clock को वापस से उसी position पे लेके आते हैं, right? और हमारी ये जो दोनों clock है ना, वो दोनों precise clock है. They can measure like microseconds, nanoseconds, let's say. तो क्या होगा? So like they both will show different time, right? We all know about general relativity. So time moves differently for different clocks, let's say. Then let's say एक ट्विन दो बच्चे दोनों ट्विन है, वो दोनों ट्विन लाइक दोनों एक ही टाइम पे पैदा हुए थे. नाउ एक ट्विन एक पहाड़ पे जाके रहता है और एक ट्विन एक सी लेवल पे रहता है. तो व्हाट विल हैपन व्हेन आफ्टर 20 or 30 years they both will have different ages. One will be younger and other will be older. Now there is one more experiment, let's say the simple pendulum, जो हम लोग रोज करते हैं. लाइक फिजिक्स लैब का फर्स्ट एक्सपेरिमेंट सिंपल पेंडुलम होता है. तो उस एक्सपेरिमेंट में बेसिकली करते क्या है, पेंडुलम स्विंग हो रहा है और हम लोग बेसिकली एक क्लॉक को देखते हैं और हम लोग बोलते हैं कि लाइक ओके इतना पर्टिकुलर पेंडुलम ने वाइब्रेशन किया, इतने ऑसिलेशंस किए इतने सेकंड में. बट एक्चुअली हम लोग देख क्या रहे हैं, हम लोग देख रहे हैं वो क्लॉक का हैंड मिनट वाला हैंड जो है वो वो कितना मूव हो रहा है वो पेंडुलम के मूवमेंट के हिसाब से. लाइक समथिंग एज अ फंक्शन ऑफ समथिंग, समझ लो, लाइक समथिंग एज अ फंक्शन ऑफ समथिंग. तो लाइक यहाँ पे हैंड मिनट का मोशन हम लोग देख रहे हैं क्लॉक के मोशन से. सॉरी, क्लॉक का हैंड मिनट का मोशन हम लोग कंपेयर कर रहे हैं विद ऑसिलेशन से. ठीक है. Someone said something.
Yeah, I raised it. If you wanted to.
Yeah.
So you raised the point that time moves different for different clocks, but the fact is we have a theory to predict how the difference happens, how to measure the difference. So what will you comment on that? So we can measure time, right?
हाँ, okay. So theory हमारे पास आइंस्टाइन की theory बोल रहे हो, right? But we have another theory. आइंस्टाइन की theory जो है उससे भी अलग आगे की theory, quantum gravity. क्वांटम ग्रेविटी में क्या होता है, आइंस्टाइन की थ्योरी फेल होती है. लाइक हम लोग अगर क्वांटम डोमेन में जाएंगे तो टाइम का जो फैक्ट है, जो हम लोग मानते हैं कि लाइक टाइम इज, जैसे कि तुम्हारा आर्गुमेंट टाइम इज एब्सोल्यूट, तो वहां पे क्या होगा कि क्वांटम ग्रेविटी में, क्वांटम डोमेन में टाइम इज मूविंग डिफरेंटली फॉर डिफरेंट डोमेन्स. ठीक है. तो लाइक वहां पे छोटे छोटे क्लॉक्स होंगे, हर पार्टिकल का छोटा छोटा क्लॉक्स. फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर सॉलिड है, एक ऑब्जेक्ट सॉलिड है, उसके एटम्स क्या होते हैं, एटम थोड़ी सॉलिड होते हैं, एटम तो एम्प्टी होते हैं, राइट? एटम अगर एम्प्टी है तो लाइक वो एटम कंबाइन होके सॉलिड कैसे बन गए अगर एटम एम्प्टी है तो, राइट? तो इसी तरह टाइम भी एक लाइक अगर हुआ तो लाइक वो छोटा बेसिक कंटिन्यू.
Yeah, so just one short PR. If time is not fundamental, then what according to the government is fundamental?
We don't know yet.
that
now.
will define the change.
We will basically think about it. We have to think. We have to change our thinking. We don't have to restrict ourselves to Einstein's theory of relativity or Einstein's general relativity. Concept change करो, वर्ल्ड को देखना डिफरेंट करना पड़ेगा,
Also,
तब हम लोग करेक्ट.
एक
अगर
जो
इसका ओके कंटिन्यू.
हाँ जो आपने जो क्वांटम का जो थियरी बताया, हाँ
Quantum gravity.
हाँ क्वांटम ग्रेविटी. So
You can check Wheeler-DeWitt equation.
हाँ, but does that also apply to like the bigger objects, the classical world? Does it?
Bigger objects, yes, it will apply for bigger objects as well as for smaller objects. Like वो combination है, throughout fundamental concepts को मिला के एक equation बनाई गई है, which is time independent equation. Okay, और हमारी जो fundamental equations है, velocity is dependent on time, position is dependent on time, but जो हमारी ये Wheeler-DeWitt equation है quantum gravity की, that is independent of time, and that contains every domain of the physics. ठीक है? So let me continue. Okay. No, so basically I will conclude with it. The like notion of time, ये like meaningless है. अगर तुम नॉर्मल स्पेस में रहोगे तब ये लाइक जैसे हम लोग हाई लो बोलते हैं, राइट? हाई लो का कॉन्सेप्ट स्पेस में वर्क नहीं करेगा, बट हाई लो का कॉन्सेप्ट अर्थ पे वर्क करेगा. वो हमारा कन्वेंशन है. हम लोग लाइक सेटिस्फैक्ट लाइक हम लोग समझने के लिए हमारे लिए कॉन्सेप्ट बना लेते हैं हम लोग. उसी तरह हाई लो जैसे स्पेस में वर्क नहीं करेगा, उसी तरह ये जो हमारा जो नॉर्मल टाइम का जो हम लोग कॉन्सेप्ट बनाए वो इधर वर्क नहीं करेगा नॉर्मल स्पेस में. सॉरी, नॉर्मल स्पेस में वर्क करेगा बट क्वांटम ग्रेविटी के डोमेन में वर्क नहीं करेगा. यस.
So in this sense, you are saying time is a mathematical contrast, correct? Now, made by humans to satisfy certain data points or to experience this universe, correct?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So the problem in this, if हिंदी में बोलता हूँ ना, अगर मैथ्स नहीं होता तो टाइम का कॉन्सेप्ट बना पाते.
I think you have just already exceeded the amount of time you should ask a PY. It's already over 15 seconds, and PY shouldn't be asked after 4 minutes. So this won't be considered. This PY. Yeah.
Okay, so I have to stop. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to thank.
The statement that he was making since 20 seconds was lost from its given time due to a wrong POI.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Akib had to conclude his point, and it would happen in 20 seconds, but he lost it due to.
Yeah,
I think he
like
should
Akib, you had time, at least 10 seconds you had time. Do you want to conclude your speech?
I think you should get to conclude his speech. Like I speak from Meteors. I think he should be allowed 20 seconds to conclude his speech in fair play.
Akib?
Sure.
20.
Okay, so like I was mentioning that time is meaningless in normal space. So time, the concept of notion of time becomes meaningless when we basically when we are in normal space, and when we go to quantum gravity, it completely changes. That's what I meant. Okay. So it is not fundamental. I mean.
Is that all?
That's it. No.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the second speaker from the opposition for their valuable contributions to the debate. I'd now like to invite the second speaker from the opposition for their arguments.
Firstly, I will like to start with a simple definition of arrow of time, and this nicely knits into what the first speaker of the government has spoken. The first speaker of the government defined action as action more fundamental than time, and thus proving his point. But the fact is, if I have a pen over here, I drop it, it goes down. If I have to drink water, or if I spill water, the water goes down. The water did not come out. If I drop a pen, the pen will go down. It will not come up. If I spill a drop of color in a water, it will spread. It will not come back in the dropper. The fact is, the action, as defined by the first speaker, as he said, that action is more fundamental than time. But the fact is, the actions are in certain way that it actually defines the way time works. Thus, time is not an illusion. Thus, it actually solidifies our argument that whatever because of the second law of thermodynamics.
POI.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in a black hole where the time becomes a physical quantity due to the stretching of singularity, we can traverse time backwards. Then why would it be just an arrow, not a
Again, so,
double-sided arrow?
the theories of black holes. Yes, I do agree that funny things can happen in black hole, but the fact is, even in that frame, time would exist, and again, there is no confirmation that we can travel backwards in time. There is, up till now, from whatever observational data that we have, it only certifies that there is only one direction of time, which is forward. I cannot go backward. I cannot go anywhere. But that's not the case with space. We can go up, we can go down, we can go in any direction. But time, it goes in only one direction. Thus, it solidifies that yes, there is a quantity which goes only in one direction,
POI.
fundamental, and I'll take it later. Yeah. So it goes in one direction. Secondly, I asked a POI to the first speaker regarding the duration, and the first speaker defined the duration, and I quote, as a small slice of time. Now, the fact is, you were debating against it, but even you had to define a quantity that you were debating for with respect to time. It is that fundamental, and that was a folly. So I caught it. Secondly, the first speaker again gave it to our hands by saying that there is no that time only makes sense when there is someone to observe. And there is, in this universe, we exist. According to the anthropic principle, the universe only makes sense when there are people to observe, and we are existent. We are observing, thus time makes sense. Yeah, please continue with your POI before it's 4 minutes. Yeah.
When you give an example of like water, when we drink water, it goes down.
Yeah.
So doesn't that depend on time? That what you meant, right? Like वो depend करता है, but like जब पानी like जब like मुंह में पी रहे थे और नीचे जा रहा था, तो like time is different for both of them. Like जब वो like mouth में था और like जब वो bottom पे पहुंच गया तब.
You mean the relativity?
It is not fundamental. Yes.
Yeah, but the fact is, you frame it one. So even if I am moving at a certain speed and the water is moving at a certain speed, or say object B is moving at a certain speed, 1 second for my frame is 1 second for me, 1 second for his frame is 1 second for him. And yes, there might be a difference, but we can calculate that difference because it is calculable. We know how to calculate, like we know what will be the dilation. Thus, we can measure it. Thus, time is fundamental. So as it's 4 minutes up, so I will start concluding my debate. Yeah.
POI.
4 minutes up.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wheeler defined POI.
4 minutes.
Sorry, Manu.
Yeah.
Time is
Okay, so in conclusion, I would only say that there is a quantity which is fundamental to us, which is time. Because when I asked a POI to the second speaker of the government that if not time, then what is fundamental? There was no answer. The fact is, we need to make measurements. As physicists, we need to make measurements. We need to make sense of the world around us. And for that to happen, we need a fundamental quantity, and that has to be time. If you remove that, how are we even calculating? And the job of a physicist is to calculate the world around, not to muzzle into not to not make sense of it. The job is to make sense of it, and to make sense of it, time is fundamental. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the second speaker from the opposition for their speech. At this point, I'd like to remind that POIs can be asked only after the first minute and before the last minute. That means in the duration of 1 to 4 minutes. So after the timer has I have noted it down. Okay. After the timer has hit 4, you're not supposed to ask any POIs. So just reminding that. We can now move on to the third speaker from proposition. You may please start your speech.
Okay, so as my job is to like debunk the things that the opposing party has said, so I start with the first speaker. So as he said that the future and past are deterministic, non-deterministic, and stuff like that. But the latest theory that we use, the many-world theory in quantum mechanics, the future is deterministic. It is deterministic in a lot of universes if you take them together. So if you have different terms, the combination of different terms, every term is realizable in a different part of the universe, and that is the most advanced theory that we use in physics now. And that is used to formulate a lot of quantum field theories. So, and about the fact that we are not good keeper of time, we are good keeper of time. We can keep track of time to a billionth of a second. And that relativity, about the relativity being an old theory, it is apparently not. So, according to the speaker, but it is surely an old theory. What I mean to say, because we have some model of theories that say that condensifies time to its it condensifies the Lagrangian to a point where time does not exist in it. And if we use a Lagrangian to solve for systems that are there, the 3D actual systems, then time does not come out, even when we apply the corresponding formulation to it, the corresponding time operators to it. That debunks the fact that relativity can be counted on for before and past thing. And about a point that has been repeatedly used in this debate, that if not time, then what is the fundamental quantity that we can measure? As we know it from differential geometry, we use Letov-Fernat equations, right? Letov-Fernat equation. So, for example, they use the parameter of arc length to determine the 3D trajectories of body. In statistical mechanics, in phase space, we don't have time. We have an non-implicit dependence of time on the momentum parameters, but it is implicitly dependent upon the space parameters, the trajectory of the particles in a phase space. There are a lot of examples. For example, we have gauges in electrodynamics. Some gauges are non-time independent. We have actions in quantum field theory in the form of Lagrangian. They are not time dependent, and they yield out correct results all the time. And regarding second point, I mean, when you say action that you're drinking the water and it's going inside, saying that the arrow of time is going straight and it is not coming back, using the entropy principle, I guess. So here's to it that in some form of quantum field theory, for example, Wheeler was the person who said that the positron exists as a reverse electron. And when we actually use that, it yields out correct answers to some value. It is not used much, but it turns out that we can have some good values from that theory as a reverse moving electron in time. And yeah, so universe can or cannot exist without an observer. I don't think that I need to interpret that after I've said about the many world theory that a lot of universe are realizable and it is not observer dependent, whatever is happening. Observers just tend to measure the quantity in a way that we call it as a collapse of wave function, and when it does that, we say that okay, fine, we measured that, and now if you're measuring a different thing from a different point of time, then there's a difference in the measurements. But it's just that the model that we use, if we don't use a wave function collapse model, if we use some other model, then that problem of time does not arise in that. So I don't think that time is a very good metric to judge the quantities and the dynamics of particles in this universe.
Okay, thank
Yeah, I
you.
like this.
I'd like to thank the third speaker from the proposition for their speech. Now the third speaker from the opposition. Please present your arguments.
Yeah. First of all, I'll just say sorry because something happened in my house and I have to come out for this currently. Okay. Same here. I also will counter all the three speakers, all the two actually speakers. Ka. So yeah. Uh, some point made by I think the first or second speaker was again that action dependency. The action time depends on action. Uh, that was dealt by our second speaker only, but I'll further go in that topic. Okay, obviously, it's interdependent. It's not one topic is. It's not in. You can't talk about action without time, or you can't talk about time without action. They both have to come simultaneously. That's the first point. Action and time are correlated to each other, and if one exists, the second should always exist. Yeah. And okay, one exists, the second should also exist, and this is also true for most of the cases. Actually, for every cases you see in quantum mechanics as well as uh, physical world. That's
POI.
yeah, yeah.
So the interdependence, does it mean that time is not fundamental anymore? It has some dependence on action.
uh, uh, so that okay, okay, I'll do that. Okay. What do you think? How will you define an action without respect of time, or how will you define time without respect of action? They both are fundamental, and they both are onto each other. You can't separate a single entity and can say ki, yep, that is not plausible. You have to talk about all the entities together in order to make sense. And that's what quantum mechanics itself is doing, talking about all the possible states, all the possible position, time, and every possible dimension at a state, at a yeah, at a state. And when the state is broken, the quantum state is broken, we measure the state, a certain position or position, time, momentum will be selected. Second point raised was yeah, second, the POI given to us was about the black holes. At the edge of the black hole, what will happen? Uh, okay. Here also, again, I have to say that at the edge of the black hole, we tend to have different different working of time, but that working for a observer, for example, if observer is falling down a black hole, for that observer time will absolutely make sense. Locally, time will, for that observer, will make sense. Time will flow forward, it will flow at a rate of 1 second per second. So that debunks that. And also, maybe any quantity of change will not make sense without respect of time. We do say that change is with respect to time. So yeah, if I want to define any change in anything, I have to define time. If anyone from the government can give me an argument where a change is defined without respect of time, that would be really great.
Yeah, parameterize a circle in a form of in trigonometric function, and you keep on changing the time parameter. The curvature will remain the same. For example, x is equal to
Again,
t, it will be equal to r cos t cube. We can replace t by arc length s and write the theory perfectly. Say the theory perfectly. It has been done. We use that for thermodynamics.
again, again, here also, for okay, you can, in that position, देखो, you are changing the variables. I'll talk about pure maths right now. You are changing the variables rather than changing. Okay, in this sense, you are defining time to be of some other domain. For example, here S is working as the arc length S is will work as a time dimension. It will. I can just correlate time with it. It's analogous to time in that sense. So obviously that makes S to be time variable for that space field. Yeah, that's it. That's the whole argument from my side.
Thank you, third speaker from the opposition side. We will now proceed to the reply speeches. Um, what's the whether arc length is analogous to time? Is that what you want to fact check? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Just check set of finite theoretic equations somewhere.
Kirti. All right. We'll proceed.
Yes.
Just can you just put on the chat box what you want to fact check? Thank you. Like exactly what you want to search. Put that question on the chat box. They will search it for you. All right. With that, we'll proceed on to the reply speeches. I now call upon the reply speaker from the opposition to summarize the debate.
Yeah.
3 minutes.
So yeah, I will summarize the whatever points that we have kept, and would reply to most of the fallacies put on by the opponents. We started our debate by simply defining that how to calculate motion we need a measure of time, that is we need a fundamental we need this dependence on time, through which we can calculate how where and what the object is changing and how the object is changing. Then we went on to even incorporate that even if the time is different for different frames of references, we can still calculate the difference, and we can still incorporate. We still know how time works. We then went on to define the arrow of time, which is the second law of thermodynamics, and which is incorporated, which is one of the most enshrined principles of physics, that which itself says that there is only a definite direction of time, thus saying that time is not an illusion. On the contrary, the government muzzled the debate by saying that there are quantities which we can measure, in which time is not involved. But the point is not that. The point is not if there are quantities, if there are other quantities through which we can make measurements or not. Of course, there would be, but the point is time an illusion? The topic of the debate was if time was an illusion, and I think there is where the government miserably failed to underline that if if time is to solidify the notion that time is not fundamental. So so yes, there would be better ways of measuring a system, but again, that is outside the scope of this debate, and for the relevance of this debate, the fundamentalness of time was more important, and I think the opposition has been able to prove that time is a fundamental quantity because of the reasons that I mentioned. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, reply speaker, for summarizing the debate from the opposition side. I'd now like to call upon the reply speaker from the government to summarize the debate.
Okay, so I'll start. Time is an illusion. So we had a lot of to and fro about all these things, and the opposition tried to catch on a lot on the word time. But I wish they had taken a little bit more time to think about the other part of the debate, that is an illusion. So an illusion doesn't simply mean that one thing has to be completely gone, or that we just deny the complete existence of time. An illusion means the thing that is appearing in front of us has multiple forms. It's not having a single form, it's not just a single arrow. The opposition tried to convince us that the time is very fundamental, that there is only one way that time could be, that it can only be an arrow, that it can only be the second law of thermodynamics. Our purpose wasn't to prove that time does not exist. If time did not exist, I wouldn't be able to speak at all. Our purpose was to show that time is an illusion. It has multiple forms. It's like walking through a mirror of a maze of mirrors. There are multiple forms of times. It's an illusion. It's not a single quantity. It's not a single fundamental thing. So I think we did not try to prove that it's not fundamental, because that wasn't our purpose at all. It's not our purpose. We gave lots of examples in which we can explain time in various different ways. Some examples were philosophical, some were metaphysical, some were mathematical, but these all showed that there is a very wrong notion of a fundamental time, that there is only a single kind of time. And we just try to show you that all these different ways in which time could be seen. In the end, when we were again and again asked what is fundamental, it all depends on how you see it. Manu gave an excellent way, excellent example how we can just use any different systems which doesn't involve time at all and just come up with the same answers and use them as fundamental. But what I feel is, throughout this discussion, throughout the points put forth by us as well as the opposition, there was one thing that had been constant and fundamental throughout, and that was us, the observers. It was the observers who gave meaning to anything. So, if it just came down to a simple question, what is fundamental, I would just like to conclude that we, as the beings, the things that are in the universe, we are fundamental. It's because of us that there is this time or anything around us. So I think the answer to that question is just the observer is fundamental. If there is no observer, there is no point to this debate. If there are no judges, there is no point to this debate. Thank you.
Thank you for summarizing the debate. With that, we've come to the end of this round. Time is an illusion, and I'd like to thank all the speakers for their valuable arguments. At least I would like to say I had a lot of fun listening to everything all of you had.
Definitely, definitely.
Now, I like the judges, the timers, and the fact checkers. Please move on to the link in the chat box, whereas the others can stay here, and we'll be back with an answer, with a winner, hopefully.
All right. For the speaker one of the government, you start the debate. Okay. So you need to define the topic, which was a clear definition to the topic was not given about what you interpret from the topic. Okay. And there were a few points where you contradicted yourself. I haven't written down the actual points, but there were a few points. That was because maybe you fumbled a bit in between. Maybe that's why. And Baki, the content was nice. And yeah, just a little bit more confidence. That will come the more you speak, okay? Now, the first speaker of the opposition. Again, the same issue. You did not define your how you thought, what you interpret from the topic. And the POIs which were asked, the answers I thought were not given satisfactorily. And again, confidence issue tha, very clear. You could have, you had points. We were discussing that you had points, but you were not able to articulate them properly. So yeah. The second speaker of the government, you were moving in circles a bit. Your content and everything was all right. But while speaking, you were moving in circles. So I remember you were giving an example and you're just talking about it. So that was an issue. Rest, everything was nice. Now, the second speaker of the opposition, you raised good POIs, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed the answers and the questions. And you give a good reply speech and you give good replies to the POIs also. And see, one issue that we discussed, that you should have added more points. You were just talking about what the other speakers talked about. So that was an issue. You could have added more points to your speech. Yeah.
Actually, it got. I had written the same points for my second speech, and he spoke the same thing because it's like you can apply the same logic, and then you can just use the logic, and then so it happened like that.
Yeah. Anyway, so that and the third speaker of the proposition, you had a good speech. Again, you lacked a bit of confidence. If you were more confident, I would have enjoyed your speech a lot more. And for the third speaker of the opposition, your speech was also nice. Again, since you had some issues, so you had to go outside. But rest, your speech was nice. You contradicted Nilla at one point. The second speaker, sorry, not to use the name. You contradicted Nilla at one point, and which you need to take care of. And yeah, so that's all. Great debate. I have to announce the results, right? Okay, so by a very small margin, Pulsating Pulsars won.
It's prismatic only.
Okay,
Come on.
And what do you mean by small margin? Define the number.
Okay, for me it was just 1 point. Okay.
But for me, it was a huge margin, guys.
Yeah. That's more satisfactory.
No. I'll tell you what happened in the entire debate. So first of all, I have to give you a hats off for even, attempting to debate this topic, which is a very annoyingly
Yeah.
weird topic. And next time onwards, I'm not giving such topics. Nonetheless, you can always contact Vikrant and kill Vikrant for giving such topics. Just set it up there. Yay. Okay, that's not the point. My point was that, like Vikrant said, the first speaker from the proposition, you defined time, you defined illusion, but you didn't tell us what time as an illusion would mean. Like that's the definition that we were looking for. And throughout the debate, because of that lack of clarity of what time as an illusion meant, it was a very shaky platform to. It was a very shaky platform, and you guys were throwing all sorts of arguments like, okay, time is not fundamental. Okay, fine, time is not fundamental. But then how is that connected to time being an illusion? The somehow we felt the entire debate shifted to whether time is fundamental, or if we can have, if it's a fundamental quantity or not. So I mean, it's a very difficult topic, so we get it. But yeah, it just shifted the entire thing. But otherwise, it was good. We had fun listening to both of you guys, 6 of you guys,
Yeah. The thing
and
is,
congratulations to the winners.
in this topic now, the counter arguments and the arguments can be the same. Okay, so obviously doing that makes it like more of a discussion over fundamental things rather than a delusion. Yeah.
Thank you guys. I think we